see me?
And need
Okay.
glasses too.
Great.
9:45.
Thank you. All right. So we're continuing with our discussion of Islam. We had a very brief introduction last week, and now what we're moving into is what is Islam as differentiated from Iman and then Ihsan. And these will make sense as we go along. But remember, Islam comes from this word or this root that means submission, or the peace that comes with submission. And this is submission to Allah, to God. And so there are, of course, practices, outward practices in Islam. And you often hear about the 5 pillars, which are the kind of the most basic outward practices. But what you hear about less is Iman, which are you might say, the 6 pillars of faith, or the 6 articles of faith that make up the kind of inner aspect of Islam. So it, on the outer are these practices that you do. On the inner are these beliefs that you hold. So that's what we're going to look at today. So we'll start with the 5 pillars of Islam. And the first one is one that we've already talked about before. The Shahada, this kind of basic creed of Islam, what every Muslim says, and what you would say if you wish to convert to Islam, right? And on last week's handout, I gave you the transliterated Arabic for that. I didn't put it on this one since I figure you can just go back to last week's handout if you want that. But it says, is somebody looking for last week's handout? We might have another copy over here. Did somebody need last week's? Yeah. So this is that statement: I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet or messenger. And again, if you wish to convert to Islam, you would say this 3 times in Arabic with 2 witnesses, at least 2 witnesses. But if you were already a Muslim, you would be saying this as part of your daily prayers also. And so this is the first pillar of Islam. The second are the daily prayers, Salah or Salat. The daily prayers, and that's why you notice I've got these 2 small rugs on the floor here, and I can hold them up. These are prayer rugs. These are used for Salah, because as we'll talk about in a minute. Here's the other one.
So these are actual belong to somebody?
Well, they belong to me, but they were made for. And obviously I don't use them for the purpose for which they're made. But they were made for the purpose of being prayer rugs for Salah, for the prayers 5 times a day. And we'll talk about why you might want a rug for praying in just a minute. So when they do Salat, they face Makkah or Mecca.
East is that?
Right. So they don't necessarily face east. If they are if they're say over I guess to the east of the Arabian Peninsula, they'll end up facing west. If they're in Africa, they'll end up facing north. Because they face the direction of the city of Makkah or Mecca, which is, of course, in Saudi Arabia. And that's because that when we talk about the life of Muhammad, we'll see that that's a centrally important city in his life. And there is we'll talk about this some more also, there's a building in Mecca called the Kaaba. And that is the center point of the Islamic Hajj or pilgrimage. We'll get to that. Incidentally, so Christian churches are made to face east traditionally, not more contemporary ones. So Fork, when you're standing in Fork, you're facing east. But Muslims face towards Mecca, wherever that is. They pray. So their prayers include what's known as Rakah or Rakat. These are both verbal prayers and physical prayers. And this is something that I know I've talked to you all about in other contexts, which is that after the Protestant Reformation in the West, Christians started to think of prayer as only being a verbal or mental activity. But traditionally, prayer has always included the whole of a person, both the mind and the body, the words and physical actions. And that's why in churches that are more liturgical, because they have closer or deeper roots into the past, like our church, like the Roman Catholic Church, like the Eastern Orthodox Church. And so people who come to our churches for the first time wonder why we're doing aerobics during, why we're standing and kneeling and sitting and standing and kneeling. It's because of that older way of praying, which is cross-cultural. You see this in pretty much every group of people, that prayer is something that takes up the full kind of mind and body and soul of a person, not just their thoughts and their speech, except, for Western Protestants who do the Protestant hunch. Let me just bend over slightly as I sit down, and that'll be all I do when I pray. So actually, you'll notice the Rakah, which I won't demonstrate for you because I don't know it well enough, but has the hands in Christianity we would call the Iran's position. At certain points, there's bowing, there's genuflecting or getting down on your knees. There's prostration, which is laying, actually touching your forehead to the ground, and standing, of course. And you can see all of these if you go over to Father Adam's Russian Orthodox church in town, where they don't have pews, because Most churches for most of Christian history have not had pews. And people stand and kneel, and in some places, at some points during the liturgy, prostrate, touch their head to the forehead to the ground. And it looks a whole lot like the Muslim Rakah. So this is something that is, like I said, traditional and cross-cultural. The prayer would take up the whole body and mind and soul. Because prayer is done in this way, because you're not just going to sit and say your prayers if you're a Muslim, you're going to be standing, kneeling, prostrating, and this is going to be wherever you are when the time comes for prayer. So whether you're at work or you're at the airport or whatever, you're going to want something soft to kneel down on and to prostrate on. And that's why the prayer robes.
So you carry that with you?
You carry that with you, yeah.
So you just roll it up and carry it on your arm all day or something?
I mean, it depends, because there are some, like if you were in a Muslim country, you're going to have there's going to be more places for you to say the prayers, so you might not need to carry it with you. And if you know you're going to be somewhere, I mean, you don't just necessarily have one of these, right? So you might have one at work and one at home, and and just leave them where they are if you know where you're going to be during the day. And you don't have to have a prayer robe, right? It's not like it's not sacramental in any way. It doesn't do anything. It's just supposed to, make it more comfortable. And you see, they're beautiful. I mean, they're beautifully made, right? So that adds to it also. But they're not necessary.
You know that, like, they have the pattern, like of a temple, maybe? I mean,
A mosque, yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, and whatever. Maybe you have some at home if you looked around. I don't know. It's the same.
Mhm.
It's the same idea.
Mhm.
Well, you carry your temple with you, maybe.
Or your mosque,
Interesting.
yeah, uh-huh.
Mosque.
Yeah, where you
Whatever.
pray is your mosque. Yeah, that's
Whatever
right.
works.
That's right. All right, so they pray 5 times a day. These are, observant Muslims. Just like in any religion, different people are kind of engaged to a different degree. But since this is one of the pillars of Islam, it's something that you see a lot. Folks tend to be pretty observant. So 5 times a day, Maghrib, sunset, at Isha, that is at night, at Fajr, which is the dawn, at Zhur, which is midday, and at Asr, which is the afternoon. And I've written down for you how many Rakah, how many of these units of both verbal and physical prayers are made during that time, at each of the times. Another one of or the third of the 5 pillars is Zakat. This is almsgiving, which is meant to purify whatever wealth you have, whatever you have earned. It's charitable giving to the needy, though it's important to understand that it's clearly prescribed how much you should give and to whom it should be given. So this isn't just like, stewardship time and I come up and talk to y'all about how, I preach a stewardship sermon about how you need to give and that the Bible says 10%, but of course we're not bound by the law, so you give what you can, and then somebody inevitably comes to me and says, well, I think the church is great, but I really like to give to this charity and that charity, and so on and so forth. And I say, well, that's nice. That's good. It's good that you give. Well, that's not how you might give to charities in addition to zakat, but zakat is clearly, as I said, prescribed. This is how much you give. This is those to whom you give. And in fact, in the past, not so much anymore, but in the past, in Islamic countries, it would just be taken up as a tax and distributed by the government. Now, that's not so much anymore, although there are some places, I think Pakistan has tried to reintroduce that.
What percentage?
I think it's 10, but I don't remember off the top of my head. And I'll look that up and let you know next time. The fourth of the 5 pillars is Sawm. This is fasting, and there are different times for fasting, but of course the most important and the one that this is particularly referring to is fasting during the month of Ramadan. And Ramadan, as you know, this month of fasting, the way that the fasting works is that nothing is eaten, nor do you drink, and you abstain from marital relations from sun up to sundown during the month of Ramadan. It's intense because you're not even drinking water from sun up to sundown. Now, obviously, if you have some medical need or something like that, you can do it. Also, if you're traveling, it says in the Quran that you can not fast during those days and maybe tack them on to the end of Ramadan when you're done fast, or when you're done traveling or whatever. But you're not even drinking water during the day. But once the sun has gone down, then you can eat, you can drink, whatever. Yeah. And often there's a big meal in the morning, sometimes before the sun goes up, or a big meal in the evening after it's gone down, and both of which are called the breakfast, because you're breaking the fast, right? So what else do you need to know about that? Ramadan, because of the calendar that is used, the Islamic calendar, which I believe is a lunar calendar, and they just kind of let it drift. So sometimes when you have calendars, no calendar works perfectly, so you always have to do something, add in a day or a month or something like that to keep the months basically in the natural seasons, right? We just did that this weekend with our calendar. We added a day to February, which we do every 4 years. So you typically see that in calendars, but the Islamic calendar does not do that. It doesn't fix it. So Ramadan can fall in different seasons. So you might have a Ramadan that's a really tough fast because the days are really long and the nights are short. But you also know that give it a little time and you'll have a Ramadan that's not so bad because the days are really short and the nights are long.
The closer you get to the equator, the more it's 12 hours all year.
Right.
So that works.
That's true.
So how do they base the month of Ramadan? How do they figure it out? Like we figure out Easter.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, so you just move from this month to this month. There's, like I said, it's lunar, so it's based on the moon shedding its shadow. And you just move from month to month to month, right? Because Ramadan's a whole month, and it's just part of their calendar. So,
Is it any particular month of the year?
no, that's what I'm saying. If you compared it to our calendar, which is a solar-based calendar, it moves so that it's going to happen in different seasons in different years. Their whole calendar, in other words, shifts.
So Ramadan can happen more than once in a whole year.
No. So within a year in the Islamic, so imagine the Islamic calendar just, so the way our calendar works is the seasons change, but the months are fixed, right? And so we know that December is always going to happen in winter, right? We know that, or it's always going to be when winter begins, when the equinox, or not the equinox, the solstice is, right? We know that March is always going to be when the vernal equinox is. September is always going to be, or June's always going to be when the summer solstice is, and September's always going to be when the autumnal equinox is. Our calendar is fixed in that way. Their whole calendar just moves. So Ramadan might be in the winter, it might be in the spring, it might be in the summer, it might be in the fall. But that's the same with all of their months, not just the month of Ramadan. So all of the months turn in that way. So they can all end up in any,
So is their day today, March 1st?
Well, so if you're a Muslim living in America, you're going to use the American secular calendar, right, for your secular business, but you're going to use the Islamic calendar for your sacred business. In the same way, in that sense, that Christians have a liturgical calendar, right, that doesn't line up clearly. It lines up better because the American secular calendar, the Western secular calendar, grew out of our liturgical calendar. But it doesn't line up clearly, right? The American, or the church's liturgical calendar begins roughly around the beginning of December, right? It's the first Sunday in December. So ours doesn't map on. And same with if you were Jewish, they have their own calendar also. So you use the calendar depending on what you need the calendar for. All right, so I think that's all we need to say about Ramadan for right now. Again, when I go over the life of Muhammad, I'll connect some of these pillars, these practices, to his life or to the Quranic revelation. The fifth and final of the 5 pillars is the Hajj. This is the pilgrimage. Now, actually, there's different pilgrimages you can make. There are different places you might make a pilgrimage to. But the Hajj refers particularly to the pilgrimage to Makkah or to Mecca, which an able-bodied Muslim who has the resources is expected to make at least once in their life.
Does that include women?
That's a good question. I mean, I know women certainly go on the Hajj. I don't know for sure if so I'll look into that. I don't know for sure if the expectation is the same for them as it is for men. But they definitely go. And of course, so that goes to the city of Mecca and to the Kaaba in the city. And then outside of the city, there's another important site that the pilgrimage includes. All right, so these are the 5 pillars, and how are we doing on time?
It's like over,
It's what?
almost 10
10 till.
Oh, it's 10 till. Okay, so I'm going to move really quickly then through the 6 pillars of faith, and if you have any questions, we can talk about it next time. All right, so the 6 pillars or articles of faith, this deals with Iman. So remember, Islam refers to submission. Iman refers to faith, belief. And so this kind of lists out these beliefs, but Iman is greater than just the list, just like Christian faith is more than just saying the Nicene Creed, right? Iman for Muslims is more than just these 6 articles of faith, but it's not less than this, right? The first of these is belief in Allah and Tawhid, which is the oneness or the unicity of God. So there is no God but Allah, right? And not just that, but Allah is one. So this focus on the unicity of God, that God is utterly unique, sui generis, not fitting into any kind of genre or any kind of genus we might think of. Jews confess this, and we as Christians say we confess this too, right? This is the beginning of our creed. We believe in one God. But from a Muslim perspective, Christians do not actually confess and believe in Tawhid because we, from their perspective, join other things or other persons to God, namely Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So whereas we understand Trinity as being the way that we confess the oneness of God, confess the one God, they see it as a departure from, a heretical departure from the confession of the one God. The second is belief in the angels. In Islamic, the Islamic worldview, there are obviously there's Allah, and then of Allah's created intelligent beings, there are the angels, there are humans, there are demons. All that should sound familiar, right? There's also another group called the jinn, or a jinni. Genie, yeah. And they are not, they're not at the place of angels, but they're not necessarily, they can be mischievous, they can do bad things, but not necessarily. So they're not necessarily demons. And so, some of them, there's hope for, I think, some of them to be redeemed also. If they live a good life, if they follow the path of Islam, they can also. I'm pretty sure about that. All right, so we have belief in angels. We have belief in the books given by Allah, and I mentioned some of this last time, that in Islam there are different books that have been given prior to the Quran being the perfect revelation of the Word of God. But Allah has given other books in the past. He gave the Suhufa Ibrahim, or Scrolls of Abraham, also known as the Scrolls of Earliest Revelation. He gave those to the Prophet Ibrahim, or as we would say, Abraham. There is the Suhufa Musa, the Scrolls of Moses, given to Musa or Moses. There's the Torah, or the Torah, as Jews would call it. These are the first 5 books of our Bible, right? Which were given to Musa or to Moses. There is the Zabur, or Psalms, given to Duad, or King David. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing all this right, but y'all don't know either, so it's okay. And then there is the Injil, or Gospel, given to Isa, or Jesus. And finally, the Quran, given to Muhammad. So you would believe in all these. And there may actually, and there's a suggestion, there's debate, there might be a couple other books, because the Quran mentions something like a book of illumination and a book of divine wisdom, but then some folks say, well, that's just referring to one of these that I've already listed by a different name. There's belief in prophets and messengers of Allah from Adam to Muhammad. Muhammad was the last messenger and the seal of the prophets. The difference between just a prophet and a messenger is that a messenger receives one of these books. A prophet may or may not receive a book. And for Islam, many people who we would not necessarily like biblical characters that are important, but we wouldn't call a prophet, they consider a prophet. For example, we don't tend to consider Adam or Noah prophets, but they do. All right. The fifth is belief in the day of judgment and the resurrection of the dead. So I remember one time visiting a mosque, and over top of the entrance to the mosque it said, enter if you believe in Allah and the day of judgment.
It's foretell.
Oh, okay. All right, and the last one is belief in predestination, which just means that God knows all things, that nothing happens without God, without Allah's lead. And when your faith, your inner life, your Iman, and your outer practice, your Islam, are completely in concert, and there's no, you're living it out perfectly, both inside and out, this is Ihsan, beautiful perfection. And Muhammad is a great example of Ihsan. All right?